Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for checking out my YouTube channel today, The Study of Antiquity and the Middle Ages. As always, I am your host, Nick Barksdale, and today we're joined again by Dr. Owen Rees. Dr. Rees, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a real pleasure to be able to talk about this new project.
Here's an obscure one that I found really interesting on your website, and I really wanted to know more, and that was Minoan Crete a thalassocracy?
Yeah, the theory that it's a thalassocracy is a really interesting one. This is another one of those where archaeology is really the majority of our evidence base. So this was an article which was put together by quite a collaborative effort, actually. So Joshua Barris, who's one of our main archaeological minds at Bad Ancient, we also brought in Matthew Lloyd, who is a similar archaeological and almost art history as well scholar, to really sort of look at this. Not so much because of the question of the Minoan period, which is kind of one of the great romantic civilizations that many people are kind of associated with, but it's really this idea of what actually is a thalassocracy, and can we really say that the Minoan period saw one in any way. The reason why it's particularly interesting is while thalassocracy it's a kind of a modern term, it's like a 19th century term, really to describe the British Empire. It does have some credence. We do see it kind of suggested in an ancient source. So first things first, thalassocracy. Thalassocracy comes from two Greek words. The first, thalassa, which means the sea, and sort of kratos, kratea, which is power of, or power itself. So it's control of the sea. It's fundamentally what we're talking about. So when we put that to the extent of the British Empire was predominantly a naval-based empire. It relied entirely on the sea. If you took the sea away from the British Empire, it does not have an empire anymore. So you've got two threads here. The first is you must control the sea. And the second one is the sea must be critical to your empire. The two kind of go hand in hand. Now, the reason why I bring up the fact that there is an ancient source that says it is because Thucydides, of all people, great sort of scientific historian, that's what we like to think of him as, tells us that Minos, the mythical ruler of Crete, he is considered the first who tradition, according to Thucydides, ascribes the possession of actually having a navy. So he's the first person that, according to Thucydides, had a navy. And he makes himself master of kind of a great part of what they refer to as the Hellenic Sea, so the Greek Sea. He conquers the Cycladic Isles, and he colonizes a few areas as well. This is the story Thucydides gives us. So you kind of think, oh, well, if Thucydides tells us this, and then he links this to, he then says basically the Phoenicians have this, and Athens, his own beloved Athens, has this. You're like, well, there must be some validity to this then. Problem is, Thucydides lives in the 5th century BC. This is about 1,000 years after the kind of peak of Knossos, the city that we kind of associate with the Minoans. He's referring to a tradition of Minos, who is a mythical character. The guy's the son of Zeus. It's the same as saying, the tradition of archery goes back to Heracles or something. You don't take that seriously. It's interesting. You, as a historian, you can do things with this, but what you can't do is take it as historic fact. Okay. So that's the first issue. The second thing is that this kind of leads into this idea that the Minoans, as a civilization, if you can call them that, have great power, but also are not violent. There's this real idea since Arthur Evans, since the guy who pretty much discovered and named the civilization, examined it. He presents this idea almost that Minoan art isn't particularly violent. It doesn't look particularly violent. There is scenes of some what you and I might call military activity or combat, I mean, very famously, there are boxing scenes, that is violence. However, there's this kind of idea that they somehow lived in a peaceful period. And you kind of think, well, how is that possible? That's only really possible if they have control of the sea and that no one can come to them. Yeah. So you can see how this feeds into the kind of thalassocracy idea. You know, they have control of the sea, and this explains why they're so peaceful. It might explain why they're so peaceful. Well, actually, a lot of research recently is challenging this, and they're looking at warfare during this Minoan period, whether it's the nature of warfare itself or even like studies on fortifications, defensive architecture. They do exist. You know, just because the original archaeologist who's discovering this for the first time didn't yet find it, you know, we found more. Archaeology evolves, history evolves, more evidence comes to us, we change our ideas as a result. But again, this is one of those questions where you've got to be careful. You know, we might be tempted to go, so this is absolute gibberish, you know, based on nothing. But that's slightly unfair. You know, we haven't proved that. So within Bad Ancient, we've actually assigned this a rating of unproven. You know, this is not proven. You have not proven that this is a thalassocracy. And it's impossible to prove it's not, because proving a negative is really, really hard. So the reality is we need to do more research. And that research is coming. We're doing more research to better understand the nature of warfare in Minoan Crete in particular, the power dynamics between the different Minoan sites, what we refer to as palaces, although that's not proven. There is this kind of aristocratic or like sovereign basis to this. And of course, the interconnection between those and other islands around the Aegean and elsewhere as well. So a lot of questions still reside around this, but ultimately what we need to kind of keep in mind when you're looking at stories like this thalassocracy of the Minoans, you've got to go, where does that term come from? What is this based on? And to keep an idea or keep an eye on the changes that are happening and the new research coming out.